Welcome to Visa Game Plan. Let us be your migration coach. Keith, how are you?
I'm very well, Amasha. Quite excited to have another episode with you today. I'm hoping that we could discuss the hospitality industry, especially the occupation of chef, and also discuss about cafe and restaurant managers. And I know that we can't sponsor them anymore, but I was hoping to discuss those two occupations with you today.
Yeah, so one interesting thing that happened was the hotel, the cafe and restaurant managers, they've actually taken out of the list last December.
Yes, in December, I think that was a big blow to a lot of our clients, right? There were so many of them. So what do you think they can do now that they can no longer go on to a 482 or a 186 visa?
Actually, I think they can either go for a 407, which is a training visa, or they can go regional and go for a 494.
Yeah, I think the real problem is that if you want to go for a 407, that's okay. As long as you have 1 year of work or study experience, you can go for a 407.
Right.
But it's just a training visa and it doesn't really lead to PR. But if you want to go for a 494, you really need to go to a regional area. So what are usually the regional areas in Australia? It's anywhere outside of...
Victoria.
No, Melbourne.
Melbourne.
Sydney or Brisbane. Yeah, so you can still be in Victoria or New South Wales. You just need to be outside Melbourne.
Is there like a residential requirement when it comes to the 494?
Yeah, the 494 is entirely a regional based visa. So you need to just have 3 years of work experience and be sponsored by a restaurant based regionally, and you must then also move and relocate and live regionally.
It will be a really big hit for people who were planning to get sponsored under that particular category, and then now,
482, right?
Yes, and then now they've been working for some time not in the regional area, but then now they have to relocate.
Yeah, we have a lot of clients who are working as restaurant managers or cafe managers in Melbourne or Sydney, and it's quite difficult for most of them. So either they have to just do a 407 and temporarily extend their stay in Australia while they seek some workplace based training, or they have to go regionally for the 494.
Right. So even when it comes to occupations along the hospitality trade, we've assisted chefs and then we've assisted hotel and motel managers. So when it comes to chefs, there are also caveats in relation to sponsoring them. So I think the main two caveats would be that the occupation cannot be in a mass production setting, and then the sponsor cannot really be a limited service restaurant.
Correct.
Do you want to kind of, take us through? Yes.
Yeah, definitely. I think the occupation must not be in a mass production or factory setting is quite an easy one for us to meet. So that's basically, there are a lot of centralized kitchens or factories that mass produce food. If you are working at one of those, unfortunately, even if your employer wants to sponsor you, you really can't get sponsored because that's a hard caveat. But that's quite easy. A lot of lawyers can pick it up and give you that advice and say, look, this particular workplace does not qualify. But also for clients who are working in those workplaces, they need to learn that they can't get permanent residency through those workplaces, and they'll have to find other restaurants that can sponsor them. The real one that I've seen that is problematic is this limited service restaurant caveat, or the caveat of like a mall cafe. It should not be a mall cafe. This caveat is where the department is really using right now to refuse sponsorships for chefs in Australia, right? The reason is, as you know, there's over 1.1 million temporary residents in Australia at the moment, and the department is very desperately trying to reduce the total number of temporary residents in Australia. So yes, a lot of chefs are being refused. Do you want to give some examples of some refusals we've seen recently?
Yeah, definitely. Remember, we had this case where it was more of a brunch cafe, like a brunch restaurant. Even though they had around 50 to 70 dishes in their menu, since it was more Western-based dishes, the department kind of justified it, saying, we really don't need another chef to...
Yeah, I think because it was like some burgers and sandwiches, wraps. Yeah, so it was a very modern Australian menu, but not a very complicated modern Australian menu. And despite despite the client having proven to the department that they've been working here and they've been cooking at this restaurant and performing the duties of a chef, I think the case officer just looked at it and said, no, I don't think you need a chef for it, because...
So they were not really convinced.
Yeah, the department thought that, the menu looked too simplistic, and we had another refusal that we saw where there was a client who was working at an aged care, and the department similarly refused that, right?
Yes, I think the reason for that was because they had some set menus built.
Correct, because of the nature of the aged care residents, and they got their meals to them all the time, and it was based off like a set menu that you fed them. The department say, oh, you can just have a cook do this job by actually following a set of instructions. So that was refused as well. But
so when you say a limited service restaurant, like, can we just go on elaborate on it a bit so that both our employees and employees, they understand what a limited service restaurant is?
Correct. So I think a limited service restaurant in its traditional definition is a restaurant that is primarily in the takeaway service, right? Where it's a takeaway type of restaurant, or it just has some limited menu items that is probably sold through a display cabinet, like sandwiches, or even if they were actually being cooked to order, they were mostly just preheated food that was pre-cooked, for example, or heated food that was pre-cooked is usually the type of thing that falls into this definition. But we're seeing the department rely more and more on this caveat to refuse a lot of clients, right?
Also, another question we get, Keith, from a lot of clients. Now, let's say it's a newly established restaurant. How would we go about that? I think we did a very interesting case for a restaurant.
Yeah, I think a couple of months ago, we had a client approach us and say that she was interested in buying a restaurant in regional Victoria, but she said that she wanted to do a Asian fusion type menu, and she had identified this chef who was on temporary visa that was expiring soon, but she wanted to recruit the chef to bring her vision to light, right?
But the problem also was that the company, like the restaurant, was just newly established, right?
Correct. So the restaurant that she was going to start up was going to be a new restaurant. So there was no problem with that. We still managed to get the nomination successfully approved. The real thing that we demonstrated to the department was that it's a genuine restaurant, like it was purchased not to create a migration outcome for that particular nominee, but
just not to create that dress-up position, but genuinely to hire that particular employee to perform the skills of the chef.
Correct, exactly. So that was the first thing, and the second thing that we had to work on is to prove that the restaurant can actually afford the nominee's wages and can afford to pay the nominee despite it being a startup restaurant. So that's where we spent a bit of our time really going through and asking our our client, who was the sponsor, to show the purchase documents of the restaurant, to ensure that she had enough money in the bank to meet her weekly obligations. We also got her to produce all of their weekly FPOS receipts for their sales receipts, and we provided it to the department.
Right.
So when the department saw all of that, even though it was a brand new established restaurant, they were happy to approve the nomination for us.
You've done very interesting work there.
Yeah, I think so. I think that was quite an interesting case we did. We also did a case where this it was a canteen in a school, right? And we still managed to sponsor a cafe manager. So what we did there was we actually took a lot of like photographs to show how busy the canteen was, and we showed the menu that was diverse and that it required a restaurant manager in it. This was obviously before they removed restaurant managers from the list, right? So, but still, like, what was important there was to show the department that it's a genuine position, and how you go about showing it is where the skill of the lawyer comes into play, right?
I think if it's like a proper established cafe or like a restaurant, it would be rather a direct sponsorship in that sense. But the real complicated issue comes in if it's something like a canteen or a newly established business, like to show how the genuine position is required, how you fit in that particular position into it.
I think also you have to be very careful if you are an applicant that is looking to get sponsored as a chef, and the restaurant's quite a small one, say under $1 million in turnover. There's not a lot of full-time staff, particularly the front of house staff is all casual, and in the back of house you are the only full-time chef, and the other person who is working with you is a kitchen hand / cook. If it's a small organization structure with a turnover under $1 million, you have to be very careful. The department is on the hunt to refuse these type of visas. But I would say that if you have no option, because there is no other sponsor for you available and you're genuinely working at this restaurant, I think it's okay to still go for a 482. You just need to think that there's a high chance of a refusal.
So like, let's say the visa gets refused for some reason, and then there might be clients out there who've already lodged a nomination, and then they're quite unsure if their nominations will get refused, visas will get refused. So do we have like a remedy for those kind of clients?
Definitely, because see, migration is administrative law, right? So obviously there are checks and balances. So if the case officer refuses you for policy reasons, not for reasons of failing the law, like if you have done your labor market testing correctly, or you're not paying them the correct salary, any of those things, if it's refused, there's not much we can do. But if you refuse because the case officer has a subjective assessment saying, oh, I don't think you need a chef at this restaurant because it's a limited service restaurant, for example, then I think we can actually appeal that refusal to the Administrative Review Tribunal. Now, Masha, what's interesting at the tribunal is we can actually face-to-face argue with the member of the tribunal and explain to them why the skill level of a chef is required at this restaurant. So there are a lot of cases that I'm currently assisting in where they've had nomination refusals in previous instances, but now we have actually appealed those refusals,
Right.
and we are actually capable of, I'm hopeful at least, of winning at the tribunal, because I think we can argue that case successfully.
What would be the timeline if a person's visa is refused?
Yeah, so I think there's about a 1.5 years wait now at the tribunal, but the good thing is you can use that 1.5 years also to count towards your 186 application eventually. Which
That's
is
interesting.
employer-sponsored pay. Yeah, that was an amendment recently that came in. So if your visa is refused and you appeal that refusal, the time spent on the appeal can count towards your 2-year requirement for a 186 transition visa.
Right, right. That's very interesting. I think that was a very comprehensive session. Thank you
Certainly.
very much.
Yeah, I think if you are a chef and looking to get sponsored by employers, be very careful, set yourself up properly. Think if you get refused, you can go to the tribunal, but you need to have an arguable case.
Definitely.
So I think we can leave our clients with that today.
Yeah, thank you very much, Keith. That's all for today at Visa Game Plan. See you next time.